name is Ray Kelly. I am the new lead community liaison for the consent decree monitoring team. Since I'm like first just coming out there into a new neighborhood, I'm gonna give you a little background about who I am. I've come from an organization previously called the No Boundaries Coalition in Central West Baltimore. While there, I co-founded a commission called the West Baltimore Community Commission on Police Misconduct, partnering with different organizations throughout the city. I was a founding member of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. Through this commission, we interviewed members of the community. We formalized their statements, so to speak, and we drafted a report called Over Police Yet Underserved, which got international attention. We worked closely with the DOJ throughout their investigation. We gave them access with our participants' permissions to that data. They referenced our report multiple times in their actual findings report, and we've been engaged throughout this process. The focus for us was always creating access points for communities and also formalizing and leveraging community voice. So we had multiple workshops on how to give public comment and feedback on the different intricacies throughout the consent decree process. We were able to influence recommendations through that report into what we call the People's Decree of Central West Baltimore, which is reflective, verbatim in a lot of cases in the consent decree. So we've formally engaged the community in this process that historically is unheard by the establishment. So we kind of recognize what is said in the findings report. We gave community feedback, and we were able to influence changes that impacted our community directly. So now in this role, because I've been doing this work since 2008, and my focus has always been police community relations, collaboration, as well as a specific focus on public safety group issues and things of that nature. So my role now as community liaison with the monitoring team is to just leverage those relationships, leverage, so to speak, my reputation to give access to you guys. So this consent decree is a court enforced mandate. So there are three parties, specific access points, we'll call them, to this court process, which would be us, the monitoring team, the Department of Justice, and the DOJ. Our role is to kind of discern when they are in completion or compliance of the mandate and the consent decree, and my specific role will be engagement, information, and making sure that access and transparency is happening throughout this process. So we'll start a whole new re-engagement of the consent decree monitoring team, and we're going to take it in baby chunks. Somebody told me a lot of years ago, it's only one way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So we're going to take it small, and we're going to meet with church groups and all the small neighborhood groups just to let them know what we do, what role we play. We're going to work in collaboration with the Baltimore Police Department's consent decree implementation unit, which is our partner in this process. So it has to be community, mediary, the police. Somebody's got to walk in the middle of it, and that'll be us. So we're going to make sure that you have access. Anybody that knows me, my phone number hasn't changed in 7 years. So if you could reach me then, you can reach me now, and that's what I hope to bring to this whole process is access and direct engagement. We will be just reaching out more to the smaller community groups. We're in the process now of hiring 3 more community liaisons so we can have one in every police district. I think Western, Central, and Southeastern district now. We're looking to hire a neighborhood liaison to help disseminate information and attend some of these meetings to let people know what access they have. Once again, when we're working with the consent decree implementation unit, they have a whole process and different resources where you can make complaints or make accommodations about the process of the police department. And we want to make sure that community is involved. One thing about Baltimore's consent decree is we are on pretty much record as having the most community-informed consent decree ever. We as residents have been there every step of the way. And the access for a community-informed process is written in. So just like the first year was about creating these policies and how the police department would actually function procedurally, before they actually finalized any policy, it was open for 30 days for public comment, public feedback, so those policies could fit what the community is looking for. And it's going to be the same way as we go into the second year, where the focus becomes establishing the curricula for the training on how we actually get these officers to learn how to do the stuff we propose in these policies. And we're going to use the same type of methods that the city has been working with, what they call the Office of Innovation, or the I-Team. So there's a lot of scenario-based training where they want community members to participate in these trainings so they can make real-time adjustments. So if they're displaying this scenario and one of you say, well, that doesn't really happen, they want to ask this, that, and the other, they can take that into note right there on the spot as they're developing this curriculum. So once again, we're going to kind of reestablish our roles in this. I see Chief Michelle Wurzberger just came in. She's from the consent decree implementation unit that I spoke of. And we're going to kind of establish different avenues for people to be involved, and you can count on me to make sure you get that information. So if you sign in, I think Darnell's in the back. Darnell is the community engagement coordinator for the BPD monitoring team. He'll have a sign-in sheet in the back where you can get on our mailing list, and we'll make sure you know what is happening in this process. You'll know when you have an opportunity to be engaged in this process, and we'll make sure that your voice is being heard. And through this process, we'll make sure that it's going on the right. So that's the next step that we're taking in this process. The same thing that we did with the West Baltimore Commission by formalizing and owning the narrative. That's the role that the monitors play. We take the data that the police give us, and we also take the feedback that you guys give us, so we can have comparative data to make our own assessment. So I think before we actually go in, and Ken's gonna talk about what was actually written into this whole second year plan and where we stand now, I think we'll go through and everyone introduce themselves, and then Ken will.
Do it any way you want, Ray.
Let's start from that end and end with you, so you can do your thing.
My name is Kathy O'Toole. I'm a member of the monitoring team. I served as police commissioner in Boston and chief of the Seattle PD. And this is the 5th time I've been involved in a consent decree. Once I worked as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division way back in 1999 on the New Jersey State Police case. I was the monitor in East Haven, Connecticut, where they had some significant issues with the police service there. So I went to Seattle to implement the consent decree there, and that department's now in full and effective compliance. And I've been doing some work recently in Chicago as well, so it's really a privilege to be here. You're absolutely right. The only way this works is when a community has a voice, a strong voice in the process. So welcome the opportunity to participate in several of these meetings.
I'm Seth Rosenthal. I'm one of the deputy monitors. Kathy neglected to say the specific role she's playing on the team, but at least for the next year, she is going to be really kind of running point on training reforms that the police department's going to be engaged in, as well as in some of the reforms in the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is the internal affairs function. I also have some subject matter expert roles, specifically in the area of fair and impartial and non-discriminatory policing for one, and also in the area of First Amendment protected activities. In my role as a deputy, which is really what I'm doing day to day, I kind of am the administrative deputy, so I guess I kind of make the trains run on time. I am the principal drafter of all our reports and everything we file with the court, along with Ken. I'm also the team principal interface with the court.
My name is Ken Thompson. I'm the lead monitor. I've got the easiest job. My job is not like I give you the information. I'm in the side in terms of what the consent decree requires us to do in terms of recommending certain activities to the judge. Let me say a couple of things. First of all, we welcome Ray aboard. I mean, he is really going to be a great asset to this process. It is so important that we get community input because we know we need community buy-in for this to work. And I think Ray is the perfect guy to do this. And I want you guys, he mentioned eating the elephant. I want you to eat the elephant with him. And I want you to call him and I want you to use him. Because all of us are doing different things there's so many moving parts with respect to this, the consent decree that, we're going to be spending our time in all these different areas. Ray will focus on community engagement. So if you guys have questions, if you have issues, you can call me, of course, and you can call any of us, but he is the primary person you should be reaching out to because Ray is good with engagement, and I can guarantee you that he will get you an answer within a short period of time. Let me say something else. I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. This is our fourth quarterly forum, and sometimes we have a good turnout, sometimes a little less than a good turnout. Considering the elements, I mean, it's cold out there, and I am really, really happy to see the number of people that showed up tonight. So I want to thank you guys for showing up. It shows, it gives us, it's like if you play a sport and you're going through the stadium, you kind of like your home team crowd to at least be there to cheer you on. I want you to criticize us, but it's also important for us to know that you care about this process because I can tell you, we wake up every day, we think about this 24/7. We are invested in doing our best to give the police department the best advice we can give them so that they can get to a point at some point where they should be a constitutional police department, where they are effective, but they do it in a way where they're not violating the Constitution. So it's important for all of us on this team to have you guys participate. Criticize us, compliment us, do something. But I'd rather hear criticism than hear silence because we need to hear from you. I don't want to spend too much time talking tonight because I really want to hear from everybody in this room. Let me just do something real quick. Ray has done a really good job of talking a little bit about what we've done this year. We have essentially tried to focus on what we call foundational issues because when we first became involved in this process, we recognized that the department had a ton of problems and there's no quick fix, ladies and gentlemen. There's no quick fix. The work that we're trying to do is going to take time, but it's designed to be set up in a way where we hope that if we do our job right and the police department does its job right, the reforms should be sustainable and they should last for a long, long, long time, many, many years after the monitoring team is gone. And so when I say foundational, the first thing we had to do was to work with the department, and the Justice Department was also involved in getting the department to revise and in some cases implement new policies. People say, well, what's the big deal about policy? Well, for an organization like the police department, you've got to have good policies because the officers have to know what they can do and cannot do. And as Ray mentioned, if you don't have good policies, how in the world are you going to have a good training curriculum. And so I'm really quite happy to say that I think the department has done a really, really good job this year of revising its policies. I think things are in a pretty good place right now, so that the training curriculum is being put in place now, but it has something to work from. And so I am reasonably optimistic that we're going to have a pretty good year this coming year. I'm glad that we have Ms. O'Toole with us today, because she is one of the big components of training and internal affairs. Why is that important? Well, obviously training, you can understand. I mean, I don't have to go there. You know that if you train police officers the right way, there's a good shot that they're going to be good when they go on the street. But there's another component to this. Internal affairs or office of professional responsibility is so important, because you have to have accountability. You know, even if you train officers and you tell them what to do and they're supposed to do the right thing, you're always going to have somebody that's going to decide they want to push the limits or they want to cross the line. You got to have a department that enforces integrity. And so we have spent a lot of time this year, a heck of a lot of time this year, focusing on the internal affairs department. So hopefully tonight, you guys will have some questions in that area, because this is our fourth quarterly meeting. And in this quarter, we have spent a great deal of time with training and with accountability. And so we have, and we're lucky to have Kathy here tonight who can talk about that. And I really hope you guys take advantage of that opportunity. The other good news, and of course, we as the marketing team can't take credit for it, but we now have, I think, a brand new permanent commissioner. We had the occasional meeting today. Now, I'm not going to tell you that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, because we only met him for 45 minutes. But I can tell you, everything I've heard, everything I've read, and after having met him today, I really have a good feeling about this man. I think he understands the consent decree. He's done a good job in New Orleans. New Orleans, has some serious problems, probably some problems worse than in Baltimore. I mean, police officers down there were doing some things that are just unheard of. And so, I have a good feeling about him. And so I think, this year that we're going into is going to be extremely important. Not that last year was not, because I think it was important for us to build a foundation. But now we're going into the implementation stage. This is a stage where now some of that foundational work, we should begin to see some of the fruits of our labor. And I think that since we now have a permanent commissioner, I really feel good that we're going to be able to make some pretty good department, I should say, it's not us, because it's the police department that we're trying to perform, and we watch what they do. But I am reasonably optimistic that this department is going to make some pretty good strides this year. So let me turn it over to Seth, because I want Seth to talk a little bit about our second year plan, because then it'll give you some ideas to what we expect to achieve in this coming year. So Seth, sure.
Yeah, let me start off by saying that we published our second semi-annual report just last Friday. That's available on our website, bbdmonitor.com. An overview of what's in that report is actually on a one-page sheet back there at the table. It says overview on the top. And it talks about what we as a monitoring team have done over the course of the past 6 months, really over the course of the past year. Our findings regarding the police department's compliance or lack of compliance with the consent decree, and then what to expect over the course of the next 6 months. So you'll find that overview back there. The report is long, it's about 90 pages. There is an executive summary if you want to read the short version, but that's worth reading, because that'll give you a really comprehensive take on what it is we've been doing as a monitoring team, and our assessment of how the police department is progressing under the consent decree. We've been at this about almost exactly a year now. The first year monitoring plan came online on February 16th, 2018, so a little less than a year ago. The police department has been operating, and the Shell Workers Group has been operating under the first year monitoring plan for the better part of the last year, and that's formed the basis for our assessments. It's also given us the platform for providing the Department of Technical Assistance. The reason we have to come up with these detailed annual plans is because, as Ken suggested earlier, this is a really methodical process. It's going to take a long time. You can't just go in and sort of try to see your advance. Kathy can certainly tell you that, having been involved in several consent decrees herself, including as chief of the Seattle Police Department, as it's performs under its own consent decree. But you can't fly by the seat of your pants. You really need a methodical plan for reform. So the first year plan set out that methodical plan for the first year under the consent decree. As Ken said, the focus was on the foundation, on policies, and on conducting studies on staffing, on technology, that will help set the foundation for the reforms that need to be implemented. This year, because most of the policies are done, the primary task will be training, and training officers on the new policies. There are 3 areas in particular where the new training is going to be focused. One is on use of force, one is on stop, searches, and arrests, and one is on fair, impartial, and non-discriminatory policing. Add to that electronic learning on the use of body-worn cameras. And why are we focusing on those 3 areas, really 4 areas of the consent decree? Well, it's because those are, in terms of actual policing on the street, the areas that the consent decree focuses on. The reason the consent decree focuses on those is, as you know, where the Department of Justice found there to be a pattern or practice of constitutional violations was in those areas. They found that police officers were engaged in a pattern or practice of using unreasonable force. They found that police officers were engaged in a pattern or practice of stopping, searching, and arresting people without constitutional justification. And they found that police officers were engaged in a pattern or practice of disproportionately doing those types of things to African Americans. And so that's why the training, the policy provisions in the first year are focused in those areas. That's why the training this year will focus on those areas. Let me say a couple of words about the challenges that the department is facing this year, because it's not as though this is going to be seamless. First challenge, primary challenge, is that the academy, the training academy, is extremely understaffed. There are literally a handful of officers responsible for both in-service training of current officers and recruit training of officers who are coming on the job. This is a police force of 2,500 officers, and you have, roughly speaking, 5 officers essentially, from line officers up through lieutenant, responsible for drafting curriculum and delivering that training. That can't be done. And so we've made very clear to the department that they need to bring more officers into the academy if they want to satisfy the expectations that the second-year monitoring plan is going to be placing on them. So that's the first challenge. Another challenge is that they're actually training the way that they're doing training. Up until now, every police officer has gone through 1 2-week block of training every year. Okay, so if your name gets called and you're the first officer to get trained, you get trained in February. But you're not actually held accountable to that training until the following year, almost 11 months later, because you can't be held accountable to that training until every officer's been trained that way, right? We can't have that under the consent decree. So BPD, in response to the consent decree, is changing the way that it's doing training. And it's going to take the first chunk of training next year, which is use of force and aspects of fair and impartial policing, and train officers on that this spring. Cycle all officers through that and begin to hold officers accountable to those policies on use of force and fair and impartial policing by this summer. Then we're going to do a second chunk. BPD is going to do a second chunk on stop, searches, and arrests, and other aspects of fair and impartial policing this summer. Train officers early fall, and then hold officers accountable beginning in fall. And then the last chunk, which is going to be focused exclusively on fair and impartial and non-discriminatory policing, is going to be rolled out at the end of the year, and officers will begin to be held accountable at the beginning of 2020. So they're changing the way they're doing that, and that's going to present some logistical challenges. Finally, the police department is changing the way that they're doing training. The way that the police department has done training in the past has been largely what I'm doing here, which is talking to you. That is not an effective way to train police officers. It is not an effective way to train adults. So the police department is incorporating adult learning principles into its training program. That requires more interactive and, as Ray said, scenario-based training, which includes community members in training programs. And that includes not only sort of, acting out scenarios, but also written scenarios where there are kind of focused group discussions about the right responses to certain scenarios. In addition, BPD will be amplifying and building out its electronic learning platform, because there are certain things that can be better delivered just through reading and through the electronic platform that BPD has. And so, for instance, the new training on body-worn camera, the use of body-worn cameras, that's going to be done through their electronic learning platform. It will be reinforced by in-person training, but the principal means of delivery over the course of the next year will be through electronic learning. But that's also going to present a challenge because you got to write curriculum that incorporates scenario-based training and adult learning principles, and you've got to create these new curriculum, new lesson plans for electronic training. So all of these things are going to present enormous challenges to BPD. We think that with the right resources, BPD will be up to the task, and we obviously are going to provide, through Kathy and other folks, technical assistance to BPD to make sure that they're up to the task. But it's going to present a challenge over the course of the next year. And Kathy, I don't know if you've got anything to add about the challenges presented by rolling out a new mode of training in a police department under consent decree, but if you do have anything, I'll talk about that a little bit.
I think it's not only police department or a consent decree, but policing in general. I started my police career many years ago, and when you're first a recruit out of the academy, I mean, back then we were taught to fight the war on crime, and it ended up being the police versus the community. And, we came to realize that model doesn't succeed. The police need to work with the community, not apart from the community. But to give you a sense for some of the stuff we did out in Seattle, we really focused on new policies. So we developed all the new policies, but they're only worth the paper they're written on unless the police officers know what that actually means in reality when they're out in the field. How do they apply those policies? So that's why we did a lot of scenario training. And I was the chief out there, but I said, look, I want to show the officers how important I think this is, so I'm going to go to all the training myself. Now, we've never really invested in policing across the United States. We've never invested a lot in training for in-service officers. We always invested in police officers when we first came on the job, but we never did a lot of professional development and continuous, learning. So I went to this training and I thought, man, I wish I had this 30 years ago, because we were teaching officers how to de-escalate intense situations. Rather than to ramp things up, how to calm things down. Putting them in scenarios where their hearts start racing, and pretty realistic scenarios, and getting them to behave differently, to learn how to behave differently and handle situations differently. So we did a lot of work on use of force. We did a lot of work on handling and helping people in mental health crisis. We did a lot of work on fair and impartial policing and implicit bias, recognizing that we all bring bias to the table, and we have to deal with that head on, and we have to mitigate that. So anyway, I went through all the training myself, and I thought, wow, that's unbelievable. To show you that it can work, and all you have to do is go on the website in Seattle. The statistics, we put very significant measurements in place, and use of force is down, complaints against the police are down, crime is down, surveys, community satisfaction surveys across all demographics are up, and actually police officer productivity is up as well. So all the numbers are going in the right direction, and I attribute a lot of that to the fact that we're giving the officers the direction they need through the policies, but we're also giving them the tools they need to handle very, very complicated situations out there in the field. And the last thing I'll say is, we all watch television, and you watch television, it's all about gunfights and car chases, and people think that law enforcement is all that the police do. In most communities, major cities across this country, less than 20% of police work is law enforcement. It's responding to people in need, vulnerable people who need help. And we need to give police officers the guidance and the training and the tools to handle some of those complicated situations. So I'm the eternal optimist because I've been through it. I've seen how it's changed a police department, and I've seen how it's helped develop stronger relationships between the police and the community. So, you know, again, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you tonight, and, you know, I'll definitely stick around after the formal meeting as well, if anybody wants to talk a little bit more about that.
Ray, before you start, one thing that we also to tell you, in terms of this scenario-based training, are encouraging BPD to, in the right circumstances, because you can't be involved in tactical training. But we are encouraging BPD to bring in the community during some of these scenario-based training sessions, so that you actually can get a first-hand view of how the police are being trained. You can participate to some extent. So, I mean, again, this is our effort to reach out to the community, so you guys understand what the department is doing, with the hope that you understand what kind of job they're doing, but so that you also understand what you guys need to do to make a better police department. So, Ray?
So before I field anybody's questions, I want to recognize Councilman Christopher Burnett. See how I strategically didn't introduce you until afterwards. Yeah, got it. But no, if you have any questions for the monitoring team from any aspect, we're here to answer. Go ahead, Bob. Could you say your name for me, just so I can note it?
My name is Warren Smith. We talked about working in Weston, whether Weston itself, Weston, over by Fulton Avenue.
So I worked in what we call Central West Baltimore, which is mostly the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor.
That's not
And-
too far.
Mhm.
Did you ever work on this end?
Have I ever worked
Yeah.
personally on Evanston Avenue?
Yes.
And I have not. I
Have
do
any
know.
of you ever worked up on this end? Have any of you? Okay, let me tell you about the geographics of this area. This area is 10.2 miles. And we have on a good day 16 police officers. 3 of them have positionary positions. One's on Fulton, and one's on Frederick, and by the gas station on Frederick Road near south of Ethel Avenue. 2 are up here in the village. So now there's 16 officers, 13 officers. Here we have a total of approximately 4 officers any day out of service. That now makes us a little less. That gives us, what, 8 officers in the street. How do you expect, or if you walk in force, some officers to come over to this district? How can you expect 8 officers to patrol a community at 10.2 miles? For my community, we have to depend, we're city residents, we have to depend on the county to service us. Alright? Which doesn't even apply to the decree. And, number 2 to this is, you know, we need to build up this department in Southwest. Instead of sending these kids across the city, we need to send them in Southwest. Because we only have 8 to 10 officers at any given time out there in the street doing their job. And that's the disadvantage that we in Southwest have, right? So I would love for you to ride along with Southwest and see how the phone call, depending upon the murders or the shootings or whatever, get prioritized over a domestic problem, because he just hit his wife and he didn't kill her. Right? It's the disadvantage we have in this area.
One of the things that, and that's a good question, and I can assure you that the first thing we will do is to bring this to the attention of the new commissioner, or the acting commissioner, who hopefully will be the permanent commissioner. The reason why I focus on the commissioners, as the consent decree team, you know, our job is, we don't take the place of the police department, so we're not in the business of telling them what strategies to engage in, but what we are doing, we know that there are staffing shortages in that department, and we know that they're very serious. I mean, patrol needs to be this new commissioner, one of his primary focus. The reason why I'm debating a little bit, because I also know that there's another component that needs to be addressed, and that is the internal affairs department. You know, they need enough police officers and investigators to make sure that the bad police officers are rooted out. But we recognize that patrol is an incredibly important unit that needs to be staffed, and that means that the recruitment and the hiring and the retention has to be looked at, and we also need to focus on trying to get city residents to become police officers, so that the police officers who are on this force know and and love the city that they work in. So I'm 100% behind what you say. I understand it. I think this new commissioner, I think he gets it, but that will be one of the first things that we bring to his attention, and I will personally tell him that Southwest District needs to be one of those areas he needs to look at. So I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, let me just add to that. I mean, the point that you're making underscores the conclusions reached in a staffing study that the department was required to do under the consent decree, and that was published at the end of last year, December 2018. And it, the staffing study basically said that, patrol is understaffed. It also said that OPR is understaffed and the training is understaffed. The training academy is understaffed, but with a particular emphasis on patrol. And the statistics that you just talked about certainly bear that out. There will be a staffing study that is going to be required in the second year. It's to come out. Probably the initial draft is going to be prepared by the end of the spring, and the final the report will be finalized by probably early fall. But the idea is, okay, now that we know where the weaknesses are, where the shortages are, like the shortage that you talked about, what are we going to do to fix the problem, right? What are we going to do better to recruit the kind of officers that Ken talks about? What are we going to do to civilianize certain functions? Because right now, as the staffing study showed, there are sworn officers doing things that civilians, non-sworn personnel can do. And so there's basically man and woman power being wasted, on functions that non-sworn personnel can do, right? And it's going to be up to the new chief, the new commissioner, to figure out how to redeploy people. And then it's also going to be a matter, and folks have been candid with command staff about this, there are too many specialized units within the BPD. The Gun Trace Task Force, which we all know about, was a specialized unit, which had problems as an understatement. And so, the idea is going to be to take a hard look at those specialized units and determine which of those units can be disbanded and which officers can be redeployed to patrol to address the kinds of problems that you're talking about.
Great question. Thank you.
My name is Davon Neverdon. I'm one of my activism in Baltimore is PFK Bohm. I'm the co-founder of 300 Gangsters, which is Gang Renard Nations and Salvation for the National Society. Our nation has been filling the holes. We're doing the best we can while the police department and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton came up with the consent decree. Will Kelly, Will Barnett, and all these people without a program. The way that my city works is engagement, education, and empowerment. I need you to write down 300 gangsters because you can Google me and what we have done, but what we are talking about here is hope. So a lot of the things that I'm asking this table to do is some of the things throughout this city that Kelly may have been doing up in Pennsylvania Avenue and what have been working. Because what we are talking about is 2 or 3. And I'm on Bolton and Henry every day, 7 days a week. I'm looking at zombies. They don't know this. I shouldn't be a black young man that has any weight that I walk around every day. Everybody knows. They might as well call me. I shouldn't have to walk with this if I had any faith. So that what you're saying, I'm not asking a question yet, but what I am saying is that there are people on the ground that's fighting every day. I don't get $400 million, but just to be a citizen, half of that can get done just by citizens, and it wouldn't have to come out of these people's pockets as taxpayers. Most of what you're saying is civil duty. Just basic civil duty. That your police department isn't staffed over Southwest. I'm on the ground, been on the ground since Taylor died. That's my obligation as a citizen. So what I'm saying to y'all, right now, nothing is working out of your department, because right now y'all in correction mode. The DOJ said y'all was the worst police department in the United States history. And now these people have to pay for a duty that a person signs up for anyway, which is called protect and serve. So now they gotta come right back and hope that that's what they're supposed to do. Now I'm a citizen. I rounded up almost 30,000 what y'all call gang members. That same police department said that those gang members were trying to kill the police. Where's our apology for that? Because since that, 5 of them got killed by your gun task force. So a lot of the things that y'all are saying, I respect it and I like it, but what I'm asking y'all and I'm telling you to look up 300 gangsters, because we will not be working with the police, we'll be working with the men, women, and children, where they are figuring that out. So I came here today because what's being said today is there's a little hope and it's cute, but I know that Bill Clinton and them put that consent decree together so that me and my people couldn't get a class action lawsuit and take this traditionally or maybe to the United Nations, but we're 3/5 of a person. I overstand it quite well. They're not governing citizens, they're governing, me and Kelly has to be one person, am I correct, sir? They're not governing citizens. So when we talk about citizens, we're talking about Harvard East. Now what are they governing on Penn North is what I talk about, in the way that the citizens and then the Penn Northers are being treated. They're being treated exactly how they're supposed to. So I'm wondering, how can anything change if they're not citizens on Penn North? They're black, they're 3/5 of, you know exactly what I'm saying. So what needs to be done, and what I'm asking to please, to look more into what is exactly actually in the veins of the city that's working, and not even my organization. I'm following and learning from Kelly's and all these great people that are not the police, but we should not be here about something that should be governing us. We should be using that money.
And I think we have to make it clear that we are not the police department.
I'm not saying that either.
I'm saying,
I'm with you.
I want everybody in this room to know that there is access to the monitoring team through us. We are not the police. We are here to make sure that what is written in those mandates of the consent decree actually happens. And everybody, just like we can look me, you have access to me, and you can hold me accountable, and we'll, as a team, make sure that we are accountable to the residents that this consent decree was brought forward for. So, once again,
that's why I'm here. I just let you know that the people do have someone that's gonna make sure of that, because y'all putting yourself, and that's why I'm here, because I respect that y'all can do that, but we're letting you know as a people, we're just not out here and don't know. This is not a white or black war, this is a humanitarian one. When we're on the ground, we're the prey. When everybody goes home, we are the ones who no harm, no foul want these things now. So I just wanted you to know today that there is a transparency and a blanket behind what we're trying to do.
We appreciate that and we respect it.
Thank you.
anyone else? Yes, ma'am?
My name is Jada H. Wilson. I am the Vice President of the Southwest District Police Relations Community Council. My question is, over the past 4 years, they moved the major in and out so fast until they do not, I know we're short-staffed, to get back on them, we are short-staffed, but the major is moved in and out so fast until most of the time, we don't even get a chance to know him, okay? And not only do they move the major in and out so fast, they move the officers in and out so fast. So the officers do not get a chance to know the community that they're working in. And these 4 sectors that these police officers working in, they don't get a chance to, get out and meet the people like they should in the community, because they're in and out so fast, that no one gets a chance to know them.
And I think that is an issue that we've been going through everywhere in this city. For me, many years, the turnover, the position. This past year especially, we've been, admittedly, everybody knows that the department has been extraordinarily unstable. So we are, like Brother Nevadon said, moving into now implementation with hope, because we all know it got changed. So that consent decree mandates changes that help address all these issues. The hope comes with a new commissioner that hopefully we can stabilize so this actual document can be implemented. And I'll.
Yeah, no, you're right on. Look, the staffing study itself has indicated, it's outlined the problem. We know that there's staffing shortages. I mean, there's no debate about that. The key for us right now, this is where I get my hope from, is the monitoring team. We don't set it's not our job. Our job is to watch the police to make sure that they comply with the consent decree. But what is important is the leadership at the top. And if we have a good commissioner, and I think we have one, I think that person will be able to develop the kind of strategies to address some of the issues that you're talking about. Now, let me talk about the consent decree directly, because you raised a really interesting point. And I kind of alluded to it a little while ago when I said it's important that the police department hire people that understand the city. And I'm a firm believer in that. You have to hire Baltimore City residents to the extent that you can. But I'll tell you what the consent decree does, because it recognizes another issue. It says, even if you're not from Baltimore City, it's going to require over time that any police officer be trained so that they understand the cultural issues in this city. And I think that is incredibly important, because you're not gonna be able to fill this police department with just Baltimore City residents. It might be nice to do it, but that's probably not gonna happen. So you have to recognize, I'm a practical person, I understand what realities are and you have to deal with it. And if you're gonna bring in people from other places in the state, if they're gonna work here, they need to understand the culture of this city. And that's where the consent decree is important, and it does address that.
Yeah, let me just add on to what Ken said, because, the consent decree actually has two big goals, right? And they're interrelated. One is constitutional policing. We talked a lot about that. But the other is community-oriented policing. So it's really a twin goal, community-oriented constitutional policing. And you're getting at the idea that policing needs to not only be constitutional, but community-oriented. And how can a police department actually practice community-oriented policing when there's such rapid turnover within the districts, particularly at the top, but even at the office level, right? And one of the things that will be coming online within a couple of months after the new commissioner takes over is not only the staffing plan that we talked about, where the new commissioner, with his folks is going to figure out, how to redeploy folks within the department to meet staffing needs and also bring on new folks. But it's also going to figure out how can we achieve this community policing goals within the consent decree. So at the same time that a staffing plan is going to be produced by the police department, community policing plan is going to be produced by the police department that will have the imprint of the new commissioner. And it's got to be that within that community policing plan is some resolution to the problem that you cite, which is the too rapid turnover within the districts that doesn't allow, the citizens, the folks who live in the city, to get to know the people that are policing the neighborhoods where they live. That's an essential element. I mean, obviously an essential element of effective community policing. And if turnover is too rapid, you're not going to have that.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Adam. Just a couple questions about the training. Really happy to hear that so much extra training is going to happen.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sure.
Thanks.
So in terms of the training, one, I'm curious to know about the curriculum, specifically whose job is it to ensure that it's a good training curriculum. And then I'm also curious about the repercussions of what happens if a cadet fails the training at the academy. Do they just retake it over and over again until they pass it, or will they just kind of skate on by? The same question has to do with, I understand police trainings are now going to be part of an in-service training that happens every year. Again, what happens if during that 2-week process, a police officer fails the training? Do they take it over again? And then finally, let's move past, say it's a couple of years from now, there is an improper stop, search, and seizure, and the police officer is found to have passed that training. Are there any additional repercussions that would happen because they had in fact gone through that in-service training? I appreciate your answer.
Well, thank you. Those are all really good questions, and I think it's important to note that there are state requirements, there are Maryland state requirements that the department has to achieve, and then there are also the mandates that will be required by the city. So, and you talked about both recruit training when people first come on the job, and then in-service training. And I'm not sure what the department does right now if somebody doesn't make it through the recruit training program, because we've been focused primarily on developing new policies and the curriculum around in-service training. But I believe from my career that there are some people who come into the academy you know, and they get through the selection process, but then it becomes apparent that they just don't cut it, you know? They're just not meant to be police officers, or, you know, they come to the station, or they can't, you know, they don't, achieve what they need to do during the training program. So, usually there is a considerable, attrition rate in most academies. So I think you raise a good question, and I'm gonna go back and ask that, you know, what is the attrition rate right now in the Baltimore Police Academy? Very interesting to look at that. But our focus right now is really on the in-service, and the in-service that addresses the issues that are important in the consent decree, and that is constitutional policing, use of force, fair and impartial policing, you know, and so those are the things we're really focusing on right now. I wish I could tell you exactly what the curriculum is gonna look like, but it's under development right now. And because the training staff is, you know, is relatively small right now, we hope to see that grow. But also because there have been several other police departments under consent decrees. All right, Baltimore's unique, every jurisdiction has its unique characteristics, but there are training programs on the use of force, constitutional policing, fair and impartial policing that have been developed and have worked elsewhere. So what we're trying to do is look at what was offered in Seattle, look what was offered in New Orleans, look what's been offered in Cleveland, you know, some of these other jurisdictions. Why reinvent the wheel? You know, some of this can be brought to Baltimore and then tweaked to fit into this, you know, unique environment. But I hope that you'll continue to follow this with interest, because, you know, we did invite members of the community to come in and actually sit in on our training so they could see it firsthand. And the community, was through some of the feedback, we were actually able to change our curriculum a bit, and because of some valuable community feedback. So.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the professor who's here from LA, who's actually here now and working with some training?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, we represent the monitoring team, but, and, you know, DOJ, the Department of Justice has their experts as well, and many of them have a lot of experience in police training. And then there's the LAPD has done some really good leading edge methods in training, and so members of the Baltimore PD have gone to LA to look at their curriculum and to look at their training methods, to learn from that. And then the LA, the person in LA who organized all the training out there has now come to Baltimore to try to assist here. So again, you know, it's in hopes of not reinventing the wheel, you know, create something built on experience that will really apply here in Baltimore. But it's, you know, it's a work in progress. But we hope that we've been going back and forth with the department. You know, they come to us with a recommended curriculum, and then DOJ and the monitoring team goes back to them with recommendations. And so it's kind of, there's several different iterations to it, you know. But at the end of the day, I hope it'll.
I can take it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll take it in faith that the training will be up to snuff with so many eyes on it. But the real meat of my question has to do with, so often there's a lot of training protocols that happen, and you have already alluded to the fact that, you know, there's the necessity to have retraining year after year because we forget these things. I'm just curious to know, is the monitoring team acknowledging that if they fail the training, that there should be some additional repercussions? I would just hate to see all of this effort be placed into, you know, the best training that the BPD could possibly have, but if there's nothing preventing them from kind of getting a rubber stamp saying, oh yeah, I did this training, and then, you know, come to find out that something were to happen, and again, they were in the training, and yet they didn't utilize the tools that the training was supposed to give them. I'm just curious to know if that's part of the purview of the monitoring team in terms of consequences, specifically for, I mean, we're talking about use of force, we're talking about stop, search, seizure. I mean, these are the most common concerns that you hear from constituents. What happens if they've gone through the training, got that passed, and then a year later they're involved in a use of force incident that is directly counter to what their training was supposed to have happened? I'm just curious to know.
I'll let Kathy, I mean, that goes to the accountability function.
I
I'll let
really,
Kathy answer.
thank you. I mean, three things that come to mind right away, okay? If somebody goes to training and they go back to the field and they obviously didn't get it, they're not applying what they were supposed to. Well, first, you've got a first line supervisor. There's nothing more important than that first line supervisor to keep an eye on his or her people and say, hey, you know, get back in line, and to coach that person. But, if that person's violating policies, that person needs to be held accountable. That person needs to be disciplined if appropriate, right? And fired if it's a significant violation of policy. So yes, I mean, listen, it starts with policies, you train them according to those policies, and if they don't get it, or if they fail, then you hold them accountable. So you're absolutely right, accountability is a big piece of it.
And we talked a little bit earlier, and all of these pieces kind of fit together. Remember I mentioned, or somebody mentioned, staffing shortages, and the absolute need to have enough investigators in internal affairs. Well, that's one of the reasons, because you don't want police officers who have theoretically been trained and either didn't get it or who don't want to get it. I mean, there's some people who just don't care. They'll read it and say, well, I'm going to do it the way my granddaddy did it. Well, the only way to deal with those folks is through the discipline processes. And and there are other things going on here too. What we're trying to do is set up a process where everybody's treated fairly, including police officers. So there's some police officers who maybe counseling can help. So this is where technology comes into place. I mean, if we get the right technology in place, the idea is that the supervisor should be able to, push a button on Officer Jones and see, okay, she's had 2 or 3 little incidents over the last 6 months. Well, that's a red flag. When you see a red flag and you're a supervisor, your job is to take that officer aside, figure out whether there's problems at home, whether there are financial issues, and if you can get counseling, you do it. But at the end of the day, that supervisor's job and the higher-up's job is to make sure that that police officer is capable and competent to be on the street. Because if he or she has some issues, either because they don't want to learn, or they don't care about learning, or they've got some other problems at home, and put them in a position where they are a clear and present danger to people in the community, they need to be dealt with. And so internal affairs is very important, and I think that's the only way we address the issue that you've raised.
Hello, yes, my name is Guy. I'm a lifelong resident of Baltimore City, and I've lived in this community for over 40 years. I'm a local community. Well, actually, I thought when I came out, I read that the new police commissioner was going to be here, but I'm glad I came. With the form. I'm sorry. I mean, but this is a good form. But I'm glad we have a city council member here. He just left. Well, anyway, what I wanted to say is this, I was hoping to see this gentleman here. I'm familiar with this organization, right? It's 300 gangsters, but all them guys know, and people on the street, they know that if you have a weapon on you, you're gonna get 5 years in prison. And if you, depending on what kind of weapon you have, you're gonna have the federal police come in, you're gonna get more time, and things like that. Like Gun Trace Task Force, good program, but it was corrupt, and I got to commend any police officer that takes a weapon off the street, because everybody knows that if you get caught with a weapon, you're gonna get a lot of time. So most guys that have weapons on them are intending to use them for some kind of crime or some kind of thing. Well, I'm saying basically what, I was hoping that the councilman was here, that Baltimore City, they always address this, the punishment. They had to sign up, get your man, you got 25 years, 50 years, because you got caught with an automatic weapon, or Joe Blow, he did this and he's gonna get this amount of time, right? But my thing is, a lot of things can be attributed to gangs or drugs, but all, what got me is the murders in my community, that's what I mean. But all the murders cannot be contributed to that. You got people who have little beefs or little petty things. That's what really upset me. You got a lot of little petty things that's going on that escalate into a murder. Person might not do it, they might get someone that they know to do it. But we put a lot of money into advertising that, right? Long time ago in Baltimore, they had a little simple thing. They had a little thing called like trash ball. The city was dirty. It was corny. People laugh, but I found myself instead of throwing stuff on the ground, I throw it in the trash. When I was young and coming up. But this city has never really addressed that with the young people. You could put something out there on the news that the people know. the young people know that everything don't have to be the death penalty. You know, everything don't have to escalate to a fight. Everything don't have to escalate into gunplay. You know, it's simple. And a lot of people say, yeah, well, that might not make a difference. But if you put it out there that everything is not the death penalty, and one person heard or two people heard, and make them think about it, I feel that it's worth it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right up. Yes, sir.
Mrs. O'Toole,
Yes, sir.
first of all, I have an advantage over all of you because I was a state trooper, Maryland state trooper. My thing is, you all always go all over the nation to get other people to come into your police department. And I have actually a simple question. Why can't you all tap into the state? The people who are actually a resident here to help you all understand how to treat this lady, this gentleman. Number two to you are, as a state trooper, I could never roll anywhere without my window being cracked in the winter and down during the summer. Baltimore City has a tendency, police officers, I hope you train these people this, because what I'm gonna make reference to is I'm gonna tell you where it happened at. Baltimore City has a tendency of when those officers get into their cars, they close the windows and they play whatever they want to through the phone or whatever is going on in their car. And a point of reference was a little girl, 7 years old, got killed on Emerson Avenue. Not even 100 yards from that child was a police officer that a resident had to knock on his window to let him know that she had gotten shot. Baltimore City Police Department, A, has one problem. Their officers don't want to get out of their car. B, they don't want to address the issues because the stop and frisk law has changed so much. In order to keep their job, they prefer to sit in their car and, just like this gentleman just made reference to, gunplay. They'll see a gun. They have to actually see the gun before they get out. Not saying it's not a bulge. But you're not going to question that bulge. He has to actually see the gun before he gets out. This is my problem with the city. They aren't enforcing the old laws, much less the new ones. Get involved. And that's my problem. The cars are too comfortable. The police officer is not opening up his window to find out what's going on. And number three, they aren't properly trained. We have the state of Maryland here, the state of Maryland, who could train these officers, or at least their supervisors, how to be better police officers in the street. Because one thing that you have to remember, in uniform or out of uniform, you are a man, you are a woman, you are a human being. You have to give respect and you have to give respect. And that's something the police department does not factor in. They feel that their blue makes them God or close to him. And everybody else, as this gentleman stated, is below them. I myself, I survived the street by giving respect. And you have to, that's the only way anyone can receive the discipline of not having anyone retaliate against them. Give respect, you get respect. And that's what you all have not implemented in your comments tonight. To respect one another. And I'd like that to be implemented into this decree.
Well, I don't disagree with anything you've said. The only thing I would add is, like, too often I see police officers off to the side now with their mobile phones as well, you know. And we need to engage. I mean, police need to engage. You know, can't just drive around in their air-conditioned cars and on patrol. So you're absolutely right. And you probably agree with me too that all comes down to first-line supervision too. That those supervisors need to make sure that their officers are out there actually engaging the community. But I'd love to talk a bit afterwards too and exchange contact people.
You know, these are really great, and I really hope you hold that question for the new police commissioner, because, you know, again, you know, our view, you know, the monitoring team and our job, while it's incredibly important, it's limited. I mean, we look at whether or not the department is complying with the 513 different requirements of the consent decree. That's what we do. What you're really talking about has to do with leadership. It starts at the top, and it's it's up to the commissioner to be able to funnel down. In this case, we now know who he is, his ideas and his concepts of not only how you address the terms of the consent decree, but how you deal with crime suppression. And I mean, this is part of, that's a police strategy that needs to come from the commissioner, filtered down, where you understand how this stuff works through the command staff, down to supervisors, so that their patrolmen are really become patrolmen, where maybe they should be out walking the beat like they did when I grew up in West Baltimore. So, but that's going to be a decision that the commissioner is going to have to make, and I hope he hears from you, because I think from what I've seen of him and what I've heard of him, he understands this. He will listen, and I think he will impose a strategy that hopefully will complement what you're talking about.
And I just want to add that the implementation unit has also just released their community policing plan, where it gives you a glimpse of what the strategy is moving forward. Everything that we heard tonight are things that we noted, were recorded, and were proposed to be remedied in the consent decree. So there is a plan. Our role as community members is to make sure that we're getting engaged in this process and making sure that it's a community informed process. So if you know my background, I don't believe that there's one community policing model that's going to fit the 250 neighborhoods of Baltimore City. But I do believe that we can create a model for community informed listening in every community, so we can cater each community to fit their immediate priorities. But that also goes into actual cultural change in the police department, getting them out the cars, getting police to engage. That's been the foundation of all of my work. Was in 2008, we fought for visibility in foot patrol. So we know, the city knows, the court knows, the monitoring team knows that community engagement becomes that most important cause, because we now have a historic time to actually influence the changes that are going to impact us. So we come into the room, we are the distressed, the impacted communities. So now we present the opportunity to actually engage. And what happens throughout this process is your voice is leveraged for the first time now against what the department is saying. And from this, hopefully we find a workable model. Any other questions?
When we had discovered that 300 gangs is going to be fly all over the United States as well, in Oakland, Detroit, Milwaukee, basically, and what we have learned and what we bring to the table, because we fly with you the same thing that you do, there's no harm to the practice of man or woman who would ever want to be a police, but we have different brands. What we are experiencing due to the short of police departments throughout the United States because of this clutch that has been happening with, stop and frisk. Nobody wants to really be a cop. But what has happened is that when you bring a person that comes straight over from Iraq to be a police officer, their actions are reaction of a military police and, as you said, from your community police. We have, in our study, have seen there are two type of, one's a reactionary and one is a revolutionary. Most of we have learned that the shootings throughout the United States were 9 times out of the 10 were people who came from a military basic background, and that's why their training deemed that it was not unconstitutional and they could kill us because of the type of brand of byproduct that we are accepting in our departments. What we are asking, it takes a felon to leave a felon out of water the flames. We're asking, I think in that program, we should have more people that if you're from the military and you got it, you should be able to link up with another military police who don't got it to show him how to get it. A civilian trying to tell a military person no harm, no foul, no knock on the military. Military people think that polices are little guys to them. Like I was in the military, you're just a cop. But you may have just came in. and he can't tell him anything because of that ideology. No harm, we want G.I. Joe type of guys in the military, but that ideology, not saying no harm or no foul, but that's what we're experiencing on the ground, even to the aggressiveness of when someone does something. It's the product of the person. So you need to know that just because we got holes, we might only got 8 people in the district, to fill them up with a military operative type of thinking department, we're gonna be in trouble as you notice. So again, we need to know the byproducts. I don't care if they came from Baltimore or from anywhere. If that type of ideology is in these systems, we're gonna have the same situation we have today of reactionaries and not revolutionaries.
We call it warriors versus guardians.
Sounds great, but we don't,
We don't want warriors.
No, sir. No, sir. Not for civilians. Now, in the army, yes.
My name is Thaddeus, but when I was coming up as an 8-year-old, all of them had a beat, when they got to know the community. They had a block, maybe 5 blocks, north and south, east and west, but they knew the community. Why don't they go back into the past and bring that back into the future, call clear on me?
I think that's what everybody is saying. If anybody knows, that's the foundation of my work is advocating for foot patrols. We all, Chief O'Toole said it multiple times, engagement is the key. And Baltimore City, we kind of focus more on the tactical. And that has led to this decades of unconstitutional policing, and we have been focused more on investigate and apprehend than actually creating a better and safer environment. So that's something that the consent decree aims to change. Once again, we're the monitoring team where we're making sure the police department is in compliance with what's written in the consent decree, but there's still much influence that you have in actually creating a different police department. We can't just have that same type of police department under new policies. We actually have to change the culture of this police department.
But it had worked over there.
I don't disagree with you at all. I don't disagree.
But why, stop what was working?
You can't answer me why. I'm not the one. I've answered why 100,000 times.
Those are really good questions again for the new police commissioner. That's exactly what he needs to hear.
It's you, and then you have another question? Anybody else so I can? Okay.
Poor Brian.
1, 2, since you have names, I'm gonna let him go, then her, then you, okay?
Don't forget Brian.
This is just to kind of piggyback what you all were just talking about. So part of the issue I think is it's kind of like in contrast to what you were saying before, how there shouldn't be like a cookie cutter standardized way that you treat every neighborhood in the city. I think it becomes an issue because like an area like Morrow Park, right, they do have foot patrols. I've seen them. In the Southwest District, Captain Harris is talking about making sure each one of his cops does exactly what they were saying before. Roll down the windows, turn your heat up on high, in the winter. Turn your AC up, but make sure your windows are down. And then he's also making sure that books that they go around in each business in the area and sign in so they actually get out their card. But those things aren't standardized. Each area does its own thing. It needs to be standardized if you want to affect real change across the whole entire city.
So I think, when Bax was here, there was a policy introduced that mandated that they get out of their cars and actually walk for a certain period of time. I know that Commissioner Davis took it a step further where they were required to do a certain number of actual engagements every day, but you're right, it's not standardized to this point, and it should become, but like this is the second year of the consent decree where we're creating these policies. This is the input that we seek so we can make it right. So we're in process. Me personally, I feel like we're a year beyond asking why because now we have a court that's laid out how we changed it already. So the question should become, how do we expedite it? How do we, as residents of the city, push it forward? So I mean, I don't disagree with anybody. That is of issue, is how do we kind of create this engagement? We all know this is a issue of trust, and we're building trust with this police department from excavation stage. So this is going to be a process. We're talking about documented decades of unconstitutional and oppressive, really, tactics by this police department. So that's not something that can actually be written, stamped, and done tomorrow. But there is a process, and we're in it. And that's our role, as if we want to see a specific change in our community, then it's up to us to show up and speak that specific change. Because coming back after policy is written and say, well, they didn't do this and this is what we want, is not helping us in the process through this community engagement. But thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Central District, and I just have an operational question, which is, how far in advance are we putting these in-person community events on Facebook?
Yeah, I can't hear your
How
question.
far in advance?
Are we putting these community events in-person on? How are you feeling?
I'm all right, how are you?
So this one was put on Facebook 1 quarter before we had it. So we actually posted it at the end of our last one. So we gave 3 months lead time. And then we started email blasting, Facebook regularly, and pamphleting. Would you say probably about 8 weeks out, Daniel?
Yes.
It's been on our webpage also for a quarter.
I think we could start advertising them in some of the popular Baltimore City voter groups so that more people hear about it. Because I think there's a surprise.
We definitely posted in Baltimore City voters.
But I love any suggestions you have. We also hope more people will share them. So if you follow BPD Monitor on the Facebook page, if you could let us know where you want to see us posted out there, tell us. We'll crack that group up. But we also, this is the first forum that we've been able to put it also on the news media as well as radio, which we're really excited about. We have a great turnout, which I hope people are able to hear those ads. But I heard you say, because I want to make sure I write it down, to post it on popular Baltimore City, and I didn't hear what you said to call
Baltimore
it.
City voters.
Voters?
Baltimore City voters is a Facebook.
Thank you,
group.
man. Thank you.
Well, we posted there, like every time.
And so I started myself as the liaison January 2nd, and I've definitely sent it out, posted it on our Facebook page and multiple other pages since then. The liaisons have been getting the word out, so I've been diligent about it myself for the past 3 weeks. I've been getting it out as far as I think my reach will handle it.
Get Brian. Great stuff, Brian. Great. Get Brian. He's raised his hand all week.
There, Brian.
It's a good follow-up question for that one. So according to the second semi-annual report, the community outreach includes a new liaison program that serves each of the 9 districts. However, there's no mention that the team was cut from 11 to 6 last summer, nor why the 17 positions were not filled out last year. This has left 3 districts, including the Western District, with no liaison, despite how much you've been talking about how important communication is tonight. Additionally, there was a call for applications in October for new liaisons. None of the applications were released, and the process was started this month without explanation. When people, including my state representative and my city council person, have asked me about the program, I simply had to shrug and tell them to email info@bpdmonitor.com. It's embarrassing that the team should be bringing transparency and accountability to the BPD as a concerning level of that itself. It's embarrassing when most community association leaders and community members I talk to don't realize that this entire process is still going on, which she alluded to. I know the former head of the program has moved on, again without explanation, but how can the citizens of Baltimore trust what's going on here with so little ongoing communication?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about the neighborhood liaison program. So yeah, so last spring when we first advertised the program, the idea was to have 17 liaisons spread across the 9 districts. You know, candidly, we did not get a huge response, and so we put the applications back out there. We had 11 liaisons, you know, to begin with. There was attrition. There were 2 liaisons who were let go, and so we got down to 6. We put back out requests for application in the fall, in October, like you said. We did get some responses. The response was still underwhelming because our community engagement liaison, Ray's predecessor, Shantae Guy, was undergoing a hard personal situation, which I won't get into, involving her family. That program, candidly, or at least the application process, was essentially put on hold. Ray has now taken over because Shantae has moved on to another job. And we put the applications back out there. We are talking about developing another model, a different model, given our budgetary constraints. The model would involve not 17 liaisons, but 9 liaisons, 1 in each district. The 17 liaisons folks are going to be spread across the districts based on district population. So some districts would get 1 liaison based on its population. Others, which were larger, like the Eastern and the Western, would get 3. That was the initial plan. That hasn't worked out that way. Look, we do not have a perfect solution for everything. And we are learning this, you know, we are learning as we're doing, right? Nobody, not one other consent decree monitoring team has deployed neighborhood liaisons in the way we have. So we don't pretend that we're getting it right right away. We're learning as we're doing. And what we've figured out over the course of the past 10 months, since we've got really not 10 months, 9 months since we've been doing the neighborhood liaison program, is that 17 liaison model with liaisons working 15 hours a month, isn't the best way to go. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to essentially divide the city in half. Right now we have Darnell Wharton, who's our community engagement coordinator, who is essentially oversees the liaisons. The Baltimore Community Mediation Center is going to hire a second person like Darnell, divide the city in half, and we're going to have 1 liaison in each district, and we're going to try to do things that way. But that's what's going on with the neighborhood liaisons. We're not trying to keep it from anybody. To the extent that people want to know, all they got to do is ask. But that's what's going on with liaisons. Ray, go ahead.
It says on the website 2018, the applications are due in 2018. It's open right now, and they're due in 2019?
The application period is open right now, yes. So that must be a typo on the website. Thank you for pointing that out.
And I just got permission from Shantae, so just to kind of quell the speculation or anything about Shantae's transition, Shantae's son was actually shot in October. So he spent, I believe, 47 days in the hospital, and understandably, she separated and took care of her #1 obligation, which was her child. And as he was released to home care, she found it more important to make sure she has time for her family. And this would have been an extra burden on her, as well as being the CEO of a large community organization and taking care of her child. So it wasn't a matter of her feeling a certain way or anything like that. She actually had a tragedy in her family. And I commit, as I've been here in this position, to make sure anyone in the city has access to the monitoring team. So if you reach out to me directly, my email address is ray.kelly@bpdmonitor.com. I'll make sure that your voice is taken into consideration and gets to the right channel. So once again, I'm open to being held accountable. I'm glad that Shantae chimed in and gave us that permission, because people need to know it's not a scheme, it's nothing sneaky. She had a legitimate family issue, and I'm happy that she recommended me to keep up with this. Yes, ma'am.
Is
reference to the community liaisons, I'd like to give kudos to Alvania Allen. Alvania is our Southwest Community Liaison. She's a member of the Lyndhurst Community Association, and she's doing an excellent job. You're welcome.
We need more of you, so get your family to apply.
Can I interject real quick? Because I really want to let you see our neighbor liaisons that are here. So if y'all can stand up, please. Alvania Allen, you already know. Southwest. Pam Curtis, Northwest. Melva Dunaway, Southern. And Howard Roberts, who is Eastern.
There you go.
You got a lot of questions, so I'll make sure.
So I wanted to pick up a different subject, picking up an earlier thread about the lack of patrol officers. And there was some discussion about reevaluating some of the tactical teams. But I also noticed in the pamphlet that recruitment and retention are part of the purview of the monitoring team. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about what the local police department would be doing to recruit more cadets or retain the ones that they have.
So that has not been a focus of the first year. One of the things that has happened during the first year is that the police department is talking about, or has actually been experimenting with involving community members in the hiring process. And so they've actually done, they've actually had two sessions of kind of mock interviews where they've included not only folks in the police department who are evaluating applicants, but on each panel, 2 members from the community. That doesn't happen a lot around the country, and maybe Kathy can speak more to that, but that is something that the police department is experimenting with in terms of what the hiring process looks like. On recruitment itself, that is one of the things that is going to be happening under the second-year plan, is the development of a recruitment plan so that they can kind of, boost their recruitment efforts and attract the kind of quality officers that the department needs. One of the foundational things during the first year that was done was a hiring study, and they tried to figure out, okay, where are we drawing people from, where are we falling short, and it was just an analysis basically of the issues with hiring over the course of the past 5 years or so. And then the next step is supposed to be building on that hiring study to come up with a recruitment plan.
I would just add that jurisdictions across the country are facing the same challenge. You're competing for the same candidate pool, and the interest in policing seems to have subsided a bit. So it's been a real challenge. So Major City Chiefs, International Association of Chiefs of Police, Police Executive Research Forum, they're all discussing this and trying to do research to not only figure out how to appeal to a larger candidate pool, but to make sure they're appealing to the right candidate pool.
Right, and just to piggyback on both of them, the one thing that I do know that they are in the process of having citizens interview panel. That is something that they're trying to pilot right now, so it's going to be on that mock stage. And previous life, I did work last year closely with the Office of Innovation, where exactly what you said was brought to light, where they're actually on the piece of marketing right now, of putting the actual visual together, where they are going to have targeted advertising. It won't be about what do they call it, the obstacle course or any SWAT. It won't be a militarized appeal. And they've also had what they call multiple prototype sessions around the city, where they've gone to different communities to figure out how do we grow indigenous police officers around the city from these communities. So I do know that there's talk about now having a junior cadet program in the high schools, similar to the ROTC structure, to kind of get the youth involved in this whole process before they actually reach that cadet age and combination type of atmosphere for them so they can set that type of achievement ladder at a high school level instead of that. Anybody else? Yeah, you just say you got a lot.
Yeah, I want to feed on what you just stated. Because I became a police officer because of Officer Briscoe, who was a Baltimore City police officer. I remember his name. This man got to be possibly dead or definitely retired more than 20 years ago. The best way to retain to get a police officer is get out of those cars, get into that community, have an interaction with this gentleman, have an interaction with that gentleman, where they can see that these people are human beings. And then, when you're going to high school, when you're going through junior college, it might be something that man could have said to you that reflected back upon your life to make you look at that job. I became a police officer because of Officer Briscoe. He worked Harford Road and 25th Street for about 15 years, all right? And I give him my love because I became a police officer emulating myself through him. That's how I became. And that's something else we don't have. You go to high school, in high school you pretty much focus on what you want to do. Most of them want to play basketball and football. But there's been no interaction between me and the police officer, so while I want to become a cop and all I see is negativity out here in the street, there's a point in your life, in everybody's life, where you want to emulate somebody. And emulating a police officer today is not where it's at, because all they see us always see is them in their car with their windows up or the weaponry, which is not a negative part of their job, but it's a part of their job. But no one sees the niceness, no one sees the human being factor in it, which the police department, what's wrong with Baltimore City Police Department? They forgot to be human beings. Bottom line, they don't need your decree. You need a manager who will respect everybody. That's the first thing. Respect your fellow brother, because you could become his neighbor.
You got it. Go ahead.
All right, so this is addressing like the retention piece of it all. Attending all the community relations meetings in the Southwest with the police officers. One thing they said they had an issue with was with other departments poaching their officers right after training. So, is there a way that part of this consent decree policy can be that these officers sign a long-term contract, at least 5 years, prior to being hired? That way they don't just come, get through academy, and then Montgomery County comes in office and $20,000 more.
So that would come from civic advocacy, where the consent decree doesn't dictate policy. But that's where we come. We have this new commissioner, we have this open process. We have to make sure that as he is onboarding, we are showing up for that as well and making sure that piece is done.
This is such an important group here. Michelle, I'm really focusing on you. You need to make sure that the commissioner, because I know he's going to be doing a lot of walks. I hope you guys show up again for the commissioner, because quite frankly, a lot of what you're talking about, he needs to hear, because this is all part of operations. This is all part of strategy. This is all part of what a commissioner does. And I mean, what you guys have come up with tonight, we're writing down those ideas, and we'll figure out a way to get it to him. But the way you described it a few minutes ago, brother, I wish I could put that on a TV ad, because that's exactly what I would do for recruitment. But I'm just telling you, you guys are really good at this. You need to show up at these meetings. We need more meetings like this. And the commissioner needs to hear from you guys, because, I mean, you've got some incredible ideas, and I think a lot of them can be implemented.
So I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So Howard, I'm going to make you the last question, but you got like 3 minutes.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. I can do it. I think the question is directed to you, Commissioner. I've heard for the change we seek, we need, I wrote it down, we need faith, we need hope, respect, informed community, Brian mentioned trust. How did trust factor into some of what you've reviewed of the policy being implemented in Boston and in Seattle? Where did trust factor in? And then I want to add, lastly, are the strategies being considered here, and would probably someone else on the panel, are the strategies being considered here to empower, are there strategies being considered here to empower those community-based organizations that have been effective at employing, educating, enriching our communities?
Well, I think I'll start with the trust, and I think everybody stated it really well here, and it starts at the top, you know, and I really look forward to, you know, meeting with the new commissioner, and I really do hope that this will be the beginning of a long period of stable leadership in the organization. And I know everywhere that I've worked as a police chief, I've recognized, because I came up through the ranks, and I recognize the only way you can succeed is if you do respect people and engage with people. And I try to be out there every single day in meetings. And you know, it's really tough when you're sitting at headquarters and the next crisis is hitting you, or the media is calling, or, you know, there's been some disaster, or the politicians are, you know, having their requests, or whatever's happening. But you really need to step away from that and get out and engage with people. And I think you lead by example, so that then your personnel down through the ranks, you know, recognize how important that is. And you set an example of how important that engagement is. I used to walk around town all the time too, on, you know, on a weekend or whatever, in my, you know, my jeans or my hoodie or, you know, baseball cap or whatever, and I'd see police officers standing off to the side, you know, just talking among themselves but not engaging with the community. And I always made it an appointment to go up and say, you know, good morning, officers. And you know, they go, you know, sometimes, you know, I wouldn't get the response I'd like. And then I'd take my sunglasses off and they'd say, hey, chief, how are you? And I said, no. That's the response I wanted the first time, you know. Just really trying to emphasize the importance of engaging with people. And, you know, I mentioned before that we need to attract the right people to the business, people that understand that it's a vocation, it's not just a job. You know, that you're there to serve the community. You know, and the law enforcement's one, you know, it's an important piece of it, but it's a small piece of it. And, you know, getting out there and helping people and engaging with people and really taking pride in your work. So I think it's going to start with the commissioner leading by example, but, you know, I've seen the police officers buy into it. You know, I've seen organizations turn around. That's why I'm very optimistic, you know, and nobody despises bad cops more than good cops. You know, and there are a lot of really good people out there in law enforcement that want to help their communities, that want to work with their communities. We just need to attract more of those type of people to our business.
Howard, let me add, the last part of your question had to do with, and I'm probably paraphrasing it incorrectly, but how do we bring in other groups that have been working on this for years? That's the reason why I'm so happy we have Ray on board. That's the easy answer. That's his job, or his primary job, and he is our engagement person. And we expect Ray to use his background, his expertise, to reach out to the groups who've been working on this stuff for years. I mean, this isn't just a brand new, you know, idea that came up in Baltimore 3-4 years ago. This has been going on for 25, 30 years. And sometimes it has high peaks and sometimes it's low in the valley. But it's been going on for a long time. The police problem's been around for a long time. We have Ray. I mean, that's our answer to your question.
In the specific ask, let me add one last thing. The specific ask for this year, as the police department begins to revise its training curriculum in earnest, is to get the community involved in helping revise that curriculum. In fact, built in to every new lesson plan that is drafted is a month-long period for community members and community-based organizations like you're talking about who've been committed to police reform to weigh in on that curriculum to say, hey, well, you know, we'd like to see this, or maybe we wouldn't like to see this, or we'd like to see something else. So that's one way the community-based organizations can get involved over the next year. And the second way is actually to participate in the training itself. The police department will be incorporating community-based organizations into the training, but we'll also be opening up training sessions to community members so that they can observe, and if the situation calls for it, participate as well. So those are two very concrete ways in which community-based organizations can get involved in the process this year.
You guys give yourselves a hand. This has been a great group. You really have. Thank you.
before you leave, please see one of our neighborhood liaisons in the back. So my focus, once again, is about community engagement. So I need to be judged. I need to know what we need to do to make sure we get it right. So there's a quick survey in the back just to help me get this process in line with what we need to do to actually implement these mandates. Second thing, please sign the sign-in sheet, get on our listserv, pick up some of the literature in the back. Make sure you find a way to get involved. There's an executive summary of the second year report in the back, just to be in the know. The final thing I want to bring to your attention, Thursday. Thursday is the quarterly hearing at the court, where not only will we present to Judge Bradar, who's overseeing this consent decree, but the BPD as well as the DOJ. What's different in this hearing is you get to hear the judge's perception of it. Everything is on the record, and the judge kind of lets you know how he perceives it. So really, this whole consent decree is overseen by this federal court, and this judge takes personal pride in making sure this happens. So I think it's important that not only do we show up to make sure that we're doing things on the street and engaging our officers, but letting this judge know that he's representing us in this process. So it's a chance to actually see what the next steps are going to be in the perception of the court. So I hope to see you all there, 101 West Lombard Street, 10 a.m. Thursday the 24th. And like Jessica said, we usually put our quarterly forums out quarter ahead of time, so as we close this one out, we know that the next one will be in April. Sign the sign-in sheet, get on the listserv, reach out to us at info@bpdmonitor.com to make sure that you get that information for the next forum. The key to this is sustained engagement. We can't just show up, run our mouth, and then walk away from the process. We have to be committed to the change, just like the police department does. And I'm going to end with that. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.